Let's start again. Go ahead and I'm here with this is Jeffrey Tucker, Liberty.me, and the Foundation for Economic Education. And I'm hanging out here with some awesome organizers of European Students for Liberty. Exciting conference coming up. So let's just go through and you introduce yourself. Go ahead.
I would let A go first.
Yeah, go ahead.
So my name is A. Hammer, and I'm a member of European Students for Liberty Executive Board, and I live in Denmark.
And I'm Yael Ossowski. I'm Programs Director of European Students for Liberty. I live in Vienna, but currently, as you can see, I'm hanging out in Ottawa, Ontario, with some good libertarians here at the Institute for Liberal Studies.
Well, welcome to the, I don't know what you would say, the Americas, you know, however briefly. And when is the European Students for Liberty conference?
So we're looking at having this conference from the March 11th through 13th in Prague, Czech Republic.
Yeah, I wanted to be there, but I guess it didn't work out for me this year. But it's exciting. We have the American Students for Liberty's, the International Students for Liberty's conference coming up this weekend. So the European Students for Liberty conference is a focus on Europe.
Yeah, basically what we're normally trying to do with the European Students for Liberty conference is bring the same that ESFLC brings to the Americas. You know, the central meeting place for the top libertarians, top students, top classical liberals in the area to come together, have a common platform, exchange ideas, hear great speeches, and have a great party.
Yes, right. And why do you think, I'm especially curious about it, because Americans know very little about the European political and intellectual culture as it affects the cause of human liberty. I suppose you have problems just like we have on the left and on the right. Can you kind of walk through that for us and sort of the challenges you face in that respect?
Sure. I think Eyð has very good experiences in dealing with that in Copenhagen, so she can tell you a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure. I mean, you say the left and the right. Of course, there's a problem with that everywhere. But in Denmark, as such, I think the movement is gaining a lot of stage, and people are going more towards looking at politics on the scale of statism versus no statism, and instead of looking at it from left to right, which I think is a positive thing.
And statism can appear from any direction. That's what I think what libertarians are discovering in the U.S. That you think that the threat is isolated, then you discover it's all around you. Actually, you know. So how much progress is being made in Denmark in particular? Is there a growth of the libertarian movement?
The biggest organization in Denmark is actually the Danish Libertarian Party's youth organization. But the thing is, they're very ideological, and they make great campaigns all the time. And probably the youth organization that gets the most media time, which is great.
Okay. And you certainly start to see in many parts of Scandinavia that you have this kind of cross-cultural mix of young classical liberals. Of course, they use the term classical liberals much more, who are coming together in political youth organizations, but also who are much more involved in kind of the non-political, ideas-driven realm. And they've been able to put together great conferences and events. There's actually a pretty large movement in Iceland that Eyð can tell you a lot more about. For them, it's been, I mean, if we look at the numbers per population, in Iceland, actually, it's one of the most popular countries that we have in the entire SFL network.
That is interesting. Iceland, that suffered so much during the financial meltdown of 2008. It seems to liberal ideas seem to be making progress there.
Yeah, I attended their conference this fall, which was in October, and it was really great. I mean, the population of Iceland is, I think, less than 300,000 people, and there were over 100 participants at the conference, which is, I mean, in percentages of the population, is probably the best conference on the continent. And yeah, I mean, we have a very dedicated team there. They put together a really great conference, and I mean, I think the future for Iceland is bright. There's a good, and there's a mentality of forward-looking forward-lookingness, and yeah, I think Iceland has great potential for a big libertarian movement if it doesn't have that already.
At least for me, the most interesting part of the entire thing is seeing how the different movements of the different countries can come together. And I think that's why the ESFLC is so interesting, in that there is a certain amount of progress that has been made in Germany. There's a certain amount of progress that has been made in a place like the Netherlands or in a place like Montenegro. And to see sort of activists coming together for just these few days, 2 to 3 days, and they're able to just share their experiences, talk about how this is all going together. I just know of certain examples of Croats talking with a lot of Czechs and talking about how they have this new regulatory change that came into place with the registers and how the registers need to be tied to the government tax office. And now they're facing this issue there, and they're finding out the best ways to try to tackle that and what they can do. And it's really cool and very fascinating to see that, at least at a forum like ESFLC.
The term libertarianism is not the choice term in Europe. It's still liberalism, classical liberalism. I like that term better.
Yeah, it's much easier to tie it to the classical thinkers, much like Hayek and Mises, to talk about liberalism, and it actually works better in every other language. You know, in French, libéralisme. You can talk about libertario a little bit in Spain. Actually, in Spain, there it's a bit different. But most other countries, like I was explaining in Denmark, and it's the liberal name carries on, which is good. We still own it.
Well, even you're standing in front of a sign that says Institute for Liberal Studies, and you're and you said Ottawa, right? So even in this part of the world, the term survives, you know, with its proper meaning. Not so much in the U.S., however.
Yeah, it's a bit odd because also in Australia they have the Liberal Party, which you know, is supposed to espouse the more classical liberal views, and they still use the term. In Canada, we still use the term. Obviously, the political party has kind of taken it over, unfortunately. But specifically amongst young people in Europe, the liberal term is used very heavily, and I think it's a very good thing. It allows us to spread the message a lot more. And in many ways, the position of classical liberalism, what we call libertarianism, is already held to be a legitimate position. It's already seen to have its place in society. You've already had classical thinkers from every tradition in every country.
Let me ask you about the intellectual influences of European liberalism today. If you were going to name, you know, sort of 3 or 5 of the top thinkers, who would they be? The books that people turn to, that sort of thing.
I think my choices, at least from Austria, would be very different from what A would say. So I'd like to hear her take.
Okay.
Well, from the top of my head is, of course, Adam Smith, who is from Scotland. But other than that, I mean, yeah, of course, the people who came from Austria and founded the Austrian School of Economics, even though it didn't stay in Austria, it went to the U.S. There is a lot of influence from the U.S. I mean, because when I think about libertarian or classical liberal thinkers, I often think about like Milton Friedman, which is a kind of a popular figure. Everybody knows. But yeah, it's I don't know, maybe Yael, you see it differently, but I find that we take a lot from the U.S. when it comes to libertarianism. We always refer a lot to the U.S.
So it's Rand, Mises, Hayek, Rothbard, Friedman.
I would say so. Yeah, and actually in some countries you do have much more of an influence from literature and culture. Specifically, I mean, at least in the German-speaking world, Stefan Zweig, who's a famous novelist from Vienna, where I live currently. His liberal ideas actually were the foundation of our campaign that we did on open borders. And also in Spain, you have Marius Vargas Llosa, who's from Chile, and a lot of his ideas, I mean, he ran for president, a very classical liberal fellow. His writings sort of also in liberalism, and that.
So I think I lost you there in the middle of the sentence. See if you come back.
It's very good in that sense.
Oh, there we go. Okay, now you're back.
Sorry, I cut out. But I was saying that Hayek, at least, had a huge influence in the United Kingdom throughout the 70s and 80s. This continued on and still goes on today. The kind of ideas of Hayek are sincerely what inspires a lot of students for liberty activists, the ideas of social change through ideas and not necessarily just through the ballot box.
Yeah, I know that's a big theme in SFL. Too, which I very much appreciate, because there's so much focus on politics these days that people can forget the importance of intellectual work. It's very easy to neglect the ideas and the readings and the thinkers in the midst of political campaigns. I see this all the time in the U.S. You know, people get caught up in political campaigns and forget to do the reading. And if they don't do the reading, then they get confused, actually.
Yeah, that's been very sad to see. But, you know, there are a lot of good circumstances in which some of these things are very well read. And I will say that in certain countries, you know, Americans would be very surprised to learn that there are very learned people who know the Austrian School of Economics and actually cite them, you know, in their duties. Specifically, I know in the Czech Republic, the vice governor of the central bank, huge proponent of Hayek. You know, very, very integrated in sort of this libertarian mold, comes to libertarian events. You know, we had key people in different countries as well. It's just really fascinating to see that and definitely learn about it. I mean, I certainly did not know that. You know, in my bubble, in other bubbles, people are able to see that. So that's really interesting.
Well, let me ask you about a couple of issues, both of you. Europe, in terms of the news that Americans get from Europe, we are bombarded every day with the refugee crisis and the issue of immigration. And the European experience has profoundly affected public opinion in the U.S. towards immigration. Now, from my point of view, the liberal position on this issue is very apparent. That you always have a preference for free migration. How does that issue affecting the shape and attitudes for the European advocates of liberty?
So I would say it's definitely been a challenge, and not just because our views are necessarily trampled or sincerely challenged. It's just that the press in the opposite direction is so overwhelming that it's very difficult to push a sort of principled philosophical stance or even to examine the situation objectively. It comes down to hearsay, to hyperbole, to all sorts of situations which are not even true, which, you know, you can't, even if you are to check them, it's going to be a correction on page 22 of the newspaper. You know, it's not going to be a huge, we're sorry we did this. I would say from Austria specifically, which has been in the news and where I live, there, you know, you've actually seen the entire population come out in droves to support the refugees that are there. I know personally in my building, our building owners, they come from the Abbey, actually some monks who own my apartment building, and they saw to it that they welcomed a Syrian family to come and stay and take one of the apartments that had been empty for a while. And this is the kind of generosity that most Austrians have been shown. I think the chaotic images that you see at train stations, were at a certain time where all of this was caused by the government, shutting down the borders, not allowing people onto the trains, not allowing people to leave. And it created this chaos and allowed the TV cameras to be there and made it very poignant. And then obviously some far-right groups will spring up. So it's been bad in that sense, but still the people have been very generous and very understanding. And most people in Eastern Europe have dealt with the situation of refugees in their own. And Europe is a continent that is made up of refugees from all places. Mm-hmm. So I think that's certainly a point to keep in mind.
Yeah, and what about in Denmark? Is the immigration issue a big one for liberty-minded thinkers?
I think most libertarians in Denmark are they're kind of in between. I mean, there are not a lot of people who are very ideological about this specific issue. So, especially because we have a very big welfare state in Denmark, and when refugees come to Denmark, it means that it's very costly because they get handouts from the government instead of just getting a green card and just be allowed to go and get a job. And most libertarians are pragmatic about this, mostly because, as I told before, it is in Denmark. It is such that people who are within the libertarian movement are also in politics. So you have this overlap between the ideological movement and the politics. So the opinions you hear are often going to be a bit more moderate. So maybe not totally open borders, but we should loosen up a little bit, allow some people to come in and try to give them access to the labor market and so on.
Yeah, a change in welfare policy would make a big difference in the U.S. I mean, the U.S. bans welfare for immigrants, but that's not the public perception. People believe that immigrants are coming here and living off the taxpayer, and it creates this kind of anti-immigrant feeling. It's mostly based on myth, but apparently in some European states it's not so much a myth. Certainly not something we deal with in the U.S., and yet we still have the strong anti-immigrant movement. Yeah.
We actually have had many circumstances where we've dealt with this refugee situation. Maybe not at least in our lifetime, but at least in our parents' lifetime. With Hungary and everything that happened there and the revolution and the uprising, many immigrants, refugees came from Hungary and went into Austria, and it was a huge amount, way bigger than the numbers today. And still, these people, some were able to integrate, but most were able to leave after a while once things calmed down. These people don't want to leave their homelands. They don't want to be separated, uprooted. It's a terrible experience that I would not wish upon my worst enemy.
Right.
These kind of grand movements of people are not associated with worldwide peace. It's normally when there's conflict and there's bad things going on. If I could promote the conference a little bit, we will have
absolutely
Lutz Klevemann, who will be speaking at our conference. He's a German journalist. He's written many books. He's been a reporter for The Telegraph in London. He's written for many newspapers in Germany, and he will actually be writing about or talking about his experiences in Africa, in Sierra Leone, and many of these countries where they've had a lot of different refugee situations that obviously we haven't covered in the same way in the West. And he has this direct experience, and he'll be just talking about what he's seen there, how the governments have been treating people, what it was like for the individuals, kind of the different factions. So he'll give us a lot of a unique perspective on that. So that'll be ESFLC in Prague.
Yeah, and just say the dates again so that everybody understands.
Sure. March 11th through 13th in Prague, Czech Republic. You can go to esflc.org. We actually have the entire website with all the speakers, with the sessions, and with our theme. Our theme this year, specifically because we're a student organization trying to empower young people to do great things across and to also remember those that came before.
I think I lost you again. We'll give it one quick second. Who else is actually speaking? I think, yeah. Did I see that Larry Reed was on the program? He's my boss at the Foundation for Economic Education.
Sure, Larry Reed will be there. He'll be one of our opening keynotes, talking about whether or not liberty needs heroes. And I guess I dropped out there, but yeah. One of our executive board members, Michael Schindler, has put together just a great theme for us of students we should remember, specifically those who rose up against the socialist regime in the Czech Republic throughout the 50s, 60s, those who also fought against the Nazis, students who rose up in the face of tyranny, of adversity, and many times were killed for it, were silenced for it. So we're actually giving out awards to top student activists on the continent using the names of those who perished in the face of such tyranny. And we've got all the background and everything on ESFLC.org. You can see that, and it's just great to say that we can have a conference like this in the year 2016, where there are peaceful regimes in Europe, knowing that there has been so much hard-fought conflict before.
I think we have a little bit of another outage here. You'll probably be back in a second. Oh,
sorry,
there we go.
Yeah.
No, there you go.
Yeah, just saying that that we can have a conference like this in peaceful Europe in 2016 in Prague. Students coming from all over Europe, a Europe that was warring, that was in conflict, not more than 10, 15 years ago. It's great to see everyone coming together.
And a Europe that now has free migration between borders, which must be awesome for Europeans, actually, to not have to deal with endless border controls and different currencies and all that kind of stuff. It's an element of freedom.
Yeah, I think definitely it's
Alabama to Florida.
We don't think about it daily when we travel to other EU countries, but as soon as we go outside the EU, we think, at least I think, God, I'm blessed that I do the EU. I stand in the line to show my passport every time. It's horror.
Yeah. It's a beautiful experiment in free migration. I just think it's awesome for Europeans. I have lots of European friends that come to the U.S. and they're in shock. Like what's happened to your country, the land of the free? I could barely get in this place.
Yeah, you now have my fingerprints.
We have fingerprints from all over the world here. We've got everybody fingerprinted. It's very sad. It's really sad. This country built on free migration. Now Europeans can't even come to visit here without being interrogated at the borders. It's right. Well, how many people are you expecting at the conference itself? Last year, because ESFLC is what, like only 5 years old or something, right? It was a very young organization.
Yeah, this is our 5th annual conference. Last year we had over 500. And this year, we were already on our way to bust that number completely, and already over 700 expected to be there in Prague.
That's awesome. Is ESFLC now the largest libertarian organization in Europe?
Yes. Sorry, I dropped out again. Yeah. Either way, huge numbers of volunteers and coordinators, largest event, surely. And we have to think that we have over 300 groups that are doing things all over the continent, and we have over 250 students that we've trained within our own program.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm so honored. I'm glad Larry is coming to speak to you. And I just have to feel like he's going to be sort of representing FEE. And I think I'm pretty almost certain that I got an invitation. And for some reason, I think I had a conflict this year. But I hope next year to be able to attend. I don't want to miss it again. And Prague just sounds like an awesome place to be, to promote the ideas of liberty. I mean, after all, Europe was the birthplace of all the ideas we believe in. And The heritage runs very deep, all the way to the Middle Ages, and Americans know nothing about this, of course. Our very young country, so I think it's awesome what's happening to the status of the ideas of liberty in Europe.
It's a good time, I think, to also live in Europe, and I think to see the cooperation, see the outcome of what has been so many years of peace, of progress, of trade, of prosperity. Getting on a train and going from country to country in less than an hour, never stopping at a border. Can't do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Was there anything else either of you would like to add before we close out here? We need everybody to go to it's ESFLC.org. Sign up to attend. You still have space. I guess you have a pretty big venue. You're going to be able to hold everybody at there once. It's going to be an awesome experience. And anybody who's in Europe who's interested in the cause of human liberty should absolutely be there and not miss it for anything, really. Is there anything else you want to add to?
I want to add, it's going to be an awesome conference, and besides from having all the traditional lectures where you go and sit and listen, we're going to have a lot of interactive sessions. For instance, we're going to have a little day trip to a gun range. So that's going to be fun.
Every time Europeans come to the U.S., they always want to go to the gun range, and I do this myself sometimes. So yeah, it's fine. In fact, the other day at the airport, they stopped me because they said that they had discovered some explosive residue on my clothing. I think this is probably because of the gun range. So that's exciting for Europeans to be able to do that. That's wonderful.
So we have a gun range outing. We've also booked a huge club. We'll definitely have social events. I mean, the amount of sort of interactive sessions that we'll have, and also students will be speaking. We have great speakers from all over the world, but also a lot of young people who are talking about ideas for the first time in public, which is going to be really great. Obviously, all the speakers, again, on ESFLC.org. You can learn a lot there, learn about the theme, what we're doing, what we're putting together, and pretty much the coolest social in the world, because we have beer sponsors, and we're in the Czech Republic. This is one of the greatest countries in Europe, where you have a great amount of freedom when it comes to many things. So, great place to be.
Yeah, much freer than the U.S. actually in that respect. You can't drink until you're 21 in the U.S. So, which discourages many Europeans from even visiting us, which I totally understand. So, we're working on it. I can promise you. I hope to see you next year. I'm sure everything is going to be awesome this year, and I know Fee is sending a lot of material there, and I'm pleased that we're able to cooperate together in the building of a great new civilization of liberty. So thank you both for hanging out with me today and for all that you do for the cause.
Thank you, Jeffrey. It's an honor.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye-bye. Bye-bye, T-Bills.
Bye.